The silence of the phone in his hand was louder than any scream. His thumb hovered over the call button, a tiny ship caught in a storm of indecision. The name on the screen, Ilara, a lighthouse that promised either safe harbor or jagged rocks. For weeks, this had been his ritual. The obsessive checking, the rereading of old messages that felt like they belonged to two entirely different people, the gut-wrenching lurch every time a notification appeared, only for it to be a news alert or a spam email. He was a ghost in his own life, haunting the digital hallways of a connection that had flatlined, refusing to accept the time of death. Her replies had grown shorter, the spaces between them longer, until they stretched into an abyss of silence that consumed his thoughts, his confidence, his very sense of self. He had sent a final, heartfelt message 3 days ago, a carefully constructed olive branch, a plea disguised as a casual check-in. He had poured his vulnerability into those few sentences, and in return he had received nothing. Not a word, not an emoji, just the crushing weight of being left on read. And now, in the dim glow of his apartment, he understood a terrifying truth. He had given her all the power. He had placed the key to his happiness, his peace, his validation squarely in her pocket, and she hadn't even acknowledged its weight. He had become a beggar for scraps of attention from a table where he once feasted. His dignity had been leaking out, drop by painful drop, with every unanswered text, every hopeful glance at his phone, every excuse he made for her silence. Tonight the bleeding had to stop. The question was no longer, what do I do to get her back? The question that began to echo in the hollowed-out chambers of his heart was, what do I do to get me back? He closed his eyes, took a deep breath that felt like his first in weeks, and deleted her number. It wasn't an act of anger or spite. It was an act of survival. It was the first step into a terrifying, unknown wilderness, the first step in walking away. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment of profound loss, he had just stumbled upon the most potent, most transformative power in the universe of human connection, the power of his own absence. Have you ever found yourself in that space? That agonizing limbo where you feel your self-worth being chipped away by someone else's indifference. You give and give, you reach out, you try to bridge a growing chasm, only to feel like you are screaming into a void. Your energy is being siphoned, your confidence is plummeting, and you begin to question everything about yourself. You start to believe their silence is a reflection of your value. This is a pain that is unique, a quiet erosion of the soul that can leave you feeling powerless and lost. We are taught to fight for what we want, to hold on, to never give up. But what if the greatest act of strength, the most profound declaration of self-love, isn't holding on tighter, but letting go completely? What if the secret to creating earth-shattering desire and reclaiming your unshakable dignity lies not in leaning in, but in walking away? This isn't about playing games. This isn't about manipulation or tricks to make someone miss you. This is about a fundamental shift in the energetic dynamics of your life. It's about understanding a deep psychological truth. Humans are wired to value what is scarce and to take for granted what is abundant. When you are constantly available, constantly seeking validation, constantly initiating contact, you inadvertently signal that your time, your energy, and your attention are of low value. You become a predictable commodity. But when you reclaim that energy, when you create a vacuum where your presence used to be, you force a reevaluation. Your absence becomes a question mark. It creates a space that the other person is forced to feel, and in that space, curiosity, respect, and often desire begin to grow. Walking away is not about abandoning a relationship. It is about returning to yourself. It is a declaration that your peace is non-negotiable, that your dignity is sacred, and that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. Today, we are going on a journey into the heart of this power. We will dismantle the psychology of distance, desire, and attraction. We will explore why creating space is not an act of rejection, but an act of profound self-respect that recalibrates how others perceive and treat you. We are going to move beyond the fear of being forgotten and step into the quiet confidence of knowing that your absence will speak volumes more than your pleading words ever could. This is the art of becoming unforgettable, not by chasing, but by choosing yourself so profoundly that your value becomes undeniable. Prepare to change not just how you navigate your relationships, but how you perceive your own worth. The journey begins with that one, terrifying, liberating step away. To truly grasp the seismic shift that occurs when you walk away, we must first understand the psychological prison of overavailability. Think of it as the pleaser's paradox. You believe that by being constantly present, agreeable, and accommodating, you are making yourself more lovable, more indispensable. You answer texts immediately. You rearrange your schedule at a moment's notice. You swallow your own needs to cater to theirs. You are trying to prove your worth through relentless accessibility. But what is the actual message you are sending? You are subconsciously communicating that your life revolves around them, that you have no pressing passions, no strong boundaries, no vibrant existence outside of their orbit. You become part of the background scenery of their life, reliable, comfortable, and ultimately unexciting. This is where a psychological principle known as reactance comes into play. Reactance is the uncomfortable feeling we get when we perceive that our freedom of choice is being threatened. When someone is too available, too eager, there is no perceived freedom for the other person to choose them. The choice has already been made by you. You are already there, a foregone conclusion. There is no challenge, no mystery, no sense of earning your affection. Because you are always there, they never have to experience the fear of you not being there. They never have to confront your absence. And without the fear of loss, there can be no true appreciation of presence. Think about a song you love. If you were forced to listen to it on a loop, 24 hours a day, how long would it take before that beautiful melody became an irritating noise? It is the silence between the notes that gives music its structure and its beauty. It is the silence between your interactions that gives your presence its value and its impact. When you are always present, you remove the silence. You become emotional noise. You are so focused on preventing them from leaving you that you don't realize you are giving them no reason to choose to stay. Your constant presence inadvertently removes their autonomy to desire you, to pursue you, to win you over. This is the state our hero, let's call him Liam, found himself in. Liam was a graphic designer, a man who spent his days creating balance, harmony, and compelling narratives on a screen. Yet in his relationship with Chloe, his own life was a chaotic mess of imbalance. He was the pursuer, the planner, the emotional caretaker. He would text her good morning every day, a little digital ray of sunshine he hoped would brighten her world. He'd spend hours crafting the perfect date ideas, only for her to cancel last minute with a vague, "So sorry, something came up." He was a bottomless well of affection and validation, but he was beginning to feel like he was pouring it all into a desert. He remembered one evening vividly. He had cooked her favorite meal, a complex pasta dish that took him 2 hours to prepare. He'd lit candles, put on a playlist of her favorite indie artists. He sent her a picture, "Your chariot awaits, my lady." Her reply came an hour after their planned meeting time. "So swamped at work, rain check." There was no emotion, no real apology, just a dismissal. Liam sat there in his beautifully orchestrated but empty apartment and felt a coldness creep into his bones that had nothing to do with the temperature. He had made her the center of his universe, and he wasn't even a flickering star in hers. He had become so available, so predictable, that his effort had become invisible. It was expected, and the expected is never cherished. Have you ever prepared a feast for someone who wasn't hungry? That is the emotional experience of the overavailable heart. You are offering a banquet of your time, your love, and your energy to someone who is emotionally full or worse, simply not interested in what you're serving. And the tragedy is, instead of questioning their appetite, you start to question the quality of your feast. You think, maybe if I add more, if I make it grander, if I try harder, then they will see its value. But you are solving the wrong problem. The problem isn't the value of what you offer, it's the perceived value. And scarcity is the godfather of perceived value. Walking away in this context is not about ghosting or being cruel. It is about closing the all-you-can-eat buffet of your attention. It's about stepping back from the role of initiator and constant provider. It's a quiet retreat. You stop sending the good morning texts. You stop being the first to view their stories. You stop asking about their day when they haven't asked about yours. You are not announcing your departure. You are simply gone. You have closed the tap. And this is where the magic begins. The first thing that happens is the pattern interrupt. Their brain, which has been conditioned to expect your constant input, suddenly registers a discrepancy. The daily good morning text doesn't arrive. The instant like on their photo is absent. This absence doesn't immediately translate to panic or desire. At first, it's just a neurological blip. That's odd. Their pattern of receiving validation from you has been broken, and the human brain is a pattern-making machine. When a pattern breaks, it seeks to understand why. For the first time, their thoughts are turning towards you not out of habit but out of curiosity. Where is he? What is he thinking? You have moved from being a predictable statement to a compelling question. This initial stage is crucial. Your silence is planting a seed. You are no longer an open book. You have become a story with a missing chapter, and the human mind detests an unfinished story. This is the Zeigarnik effect in psychology, which suggests that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. By walking away, you have left your story with them unfinished. Their mind will subconsciously want to seek out the ending. They will start to wonder about you, not because you've demanded their attention, but because your absence has created a natural, compelling mystery. For Liam, this was the hardest part. The first day of not texting Chloe felt like trying to hold his breath underwater. His thumb twitched with muscle memory. His mind was a whirlwind of anxieties. What if she doesn't even notice? What if she's relieved? What if this is the final nail in the coffin? These are the fears that keep us chained to the cycle of overavailability. The fear of being forgotten is so powerful that we choose the certainty of being ignored over the possibility of being erased. But dignity requires courage. It demands that you be willing to risk the loss of a connection in order to save yourself. He channeled his anxious energy. Instead of checking his phone, he went for a run, pushing his body until the mental noise was drowned out by physical exhaustion. Instead of scrolling through her social media, he called an old friend he hadn't spoken to in months. He began to pour all the energy he had been directing at Chloe back into his own life. He was watering his own garden for the first time in a long time. He didn't know if Chloe would ever notice, but he was starting to notice a change in himself. A little bit of the fog was lifting. A sliver of his old self, the self that existed before his world shrunk to the size of a smartphone screen, was beginning to re-emerge. He was taking the first step in demonstrating, not just to her but to himself, that his life was a full, vibrant, and compelling story even when she wasn't the main character. And that is the foundation upon which all desire and dignity are built. The second stage of this journey, after the initial terrifying act of creating silence, is a phase we can call the echo chamber of absence. This is where the true psychological alchemy begins. Your absence is no longer just a broken pattern. It starts to create an emotional echo. The spaces you used to fill, the text messages, the phone calls, the plans you always made, are now empty. And this emptiness has a weight, a presence of its own. It's like walking into a room where a large piece of furniture has been removed. You may not know what's missing at first, but you feel the void. The entire dynamic of the room has changed. You have become the missing piece of furniture in their life. This is where the principle of loss aversion powerfully enters the frame. Loss aversion, a concept from behavioral economics, describes how for most people, the pain of losing something is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. As long as you were consistently available, you were a gain they never had to work for. You were just a feature of their life. But your sudden absence frames you as a loss. They are now experiencing the emotional consequence of your missing presence. The comfort, validation, and attention you provided are gone, and the discomfort of that loss begins to register. They might not consciously think, "I miss Liam." Instead, it will manifest in subtler ways. They'll have a good day at work and instinctively reach for their phone to tell someone who would be genuinely happy for them, and they'll pause, realizing the person they would have told isn't there anymore. They'll feel a pang of loneliness on a Sunday evening and remember that you were always the one to suggest a movie or a walk. These are the moments the echo of your absence becomes audible. They are not just missing you. They are missing the way they felt about themselves when they were with you, appreciated, interesting, important. You were a mirror that reflected a positive version of themselves back to them, and that mirror is now gone. This forces a cognitive reevaluation of your worth. It's human nature to not appreciate the sun until it's a cold, rainy day. We don't appreciate our health until we're sick. And often, people don't appreciate your presence until they are confronted with your absence. Their brain begins to romanticize the past, a phenomenon known as rosy retrospection. The little annoyances or predictabilities that came with your overavailability fade away, and what remains are the amplified memories of the good times. The laughter, the support, the connection. Your absence acts as a filter, removing the mundane and highlighting the magical. Suddenly, the commodity they took for granted is recategorized in their mind as a rare, valuable asset that they have lost. For Chloe, this process began about a week into Liam's silence. The first few days she barely noticed. She was busy, caught up in her own world. But then little things started to surface. She aced a big presentation at work and had a fleeting thought, "Liam would have loved to hear about this." The thought was quickly dismissed, but it left a tiny residue. A few days later, she was scrolling through a streaming service, unable to decide what to watch, and remembered how Liam always knew the perfect, obscure documentary she'd end up loving. The void was becoming more defined. The real turning point came on a Friday night. She was out with friends, and everyone was talking about their partners, their weekends, their little dramas. Chloe felt strangely detached. The surface-level validation she got from her wide social circle felt hollow. It lacked the depth, the genuine, focused attention she had gotten from Liam without ever truly acknowledging it. She looked at her phone at their last message exchange. His last text, the one she'd ignored, now seemed different. It wasn't needy, it was open-hearted, and her lack of response, which had felt like nothing at the time, now looked cold, dismissive. She felt a pang, not just of missing him, but of something else, a flicker of shame. She was starting to see the dynamic not from her perspective of being mildly inconvenienced by his attention, but from his perspective of being consistently devalued. This is a critical moment. When someone starts to view their own behavior through your eyes, it means you have regained a measure of power and respect in their mind, all without saying a word. Your silence has given them the space to have a conversation with themselves about you, and that conversation is infinitely more powerful than any you could have forced upon them. You are no longer the prosecutor, pleading your case. Your absence has become the evidence, and their own conscience is the judge. During this time, what is your role? It is to resist the echo, Because just as your absence is echoing in their world, their silence will be echoing in yours. The temptation to reach out, to check in, to say, "See, I knew you'd miss me," will be immense. But doing so would be like a magician revealing the trick halfway through. It shatters the illusion and destroys the impact. Your power lies in your disciplined commitment to your own journey. While they are grappling with the echo of your absence, you must be busy falling in love with the sound of your own life. Liam was doing just that. He had taken on a challenging freelance project, a rebranding for a local art gallery that he was passionate about. He was spending late nights sketching, creating, losing himself in the flow of his work. He was reconnecting with friends, having conversations that weren't laced with the underlying anxiety of waiting for a text message. He was rediscovering his own rhythm. He was starting to feel not just okay, but good. He was realizing that his happiness was not a fragile thing that lived in someone else's phone, but a resilient force that was cultivated from within. One evening, after a particularly productive day, he was sitting on his balcony looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed on the table. For the first time in months, the sound didn't trigger a jolt of anxiety or desperate hope. He glanced at it. It was a message from Chloe. It read, "Hey, was just thinking about that documentary on street artists you told me about. Can't remember the name. Hope you're doing well." And in that moment, Liam understood. The dynamic had shifted. She was no longer the prize he was chasing. He was no longer the supplicant waiting for an audience. The message was casual, a breadcrumb. A year ago, he would have jumped on it, replied instantly, used it as a desperate springboard back into a conversation. But now, he felt a calm detachment. He had survived the silence. He had faced the fear of being forgotten and had discovered himself on the other side. He looked at the message, put his phone back down on the table, and turned his attention back to the city lights. He would reply, but not yet. He was no longer living his life on her time. He was living it on his. The power of walking away had not just created desire in her, it had restored dignity in him. And he was starting to realize that dignity was far more valuable than desire. The arrival of that first message, the breadcrumb as we call it, marks the transition into the third, most delicate stage, the re-engagement test. This is where your newfound self-respect and emotional discipline are put to the ultimate test. The breadcrumb is a low-effort, low-risk probe from the other person. It's designed to gauge your temperature. Are you still warm and waiting, desperate for any sign of life? Or have you gone cold, moved on completely? The way you handle this first point of contact will set the tone for the entire future of the dynamic, whether you choose to re-engage or not. The most common mistake people make here is to collapse in relief. The validation they've been craving has finally arrived, and their resolve melts away. They reply instantly and enthusiastically, flooding the conversation with all the emotion they've been suppressing. They essentially communicate, "Thank God you're back. I've been miserable without you and just waiting for you to notice me." This immediately undoes all the powerful work you've accomplished. It shows them that your absence was not a genuine shift in your focus, but a tactic. It surrenders all the mystery and perceived value you have painstakingly built. You go from being the one who walked away to the one who was just waiting by the door to be let back in. The key here is to mirror, but with a slight delay and a lower emotional temperature. Their message was casual. Your reply should be casual. Their message was short. Your reply should be short. Liam understood this instinctively. Chloe's text was about a documentary, a topic of shared interest, but it was wrapped in a casual, "Hope you're doing well." It was an indirect bid for connection. Liam waited several hours before he replied, not as a game, but because he was genuinely engaged in his life when the message came. He was no longer monitoring his phone like a hawk. When he did reply, he kept it simple, direct, and positive. He wrote, "Hey, it's called Exit Through the Gift Shop. It's a great one. And I'm doing really well, thanks. Super busy with a new design project. Hope you're good too. Let's break down the power of this response. First, the delay. It communicates that he has a life, that his world doesn't stop and start with her notifications. Second, he answered her question directly. He was helpful but not overly eager. Third, he matched her positive tone, hope you're doing well, with his own, I'm doing really well, thanks. But he went one step further. He anchored his well-being to something specific and internal, his new design project. He wasn't just good, he was busy and fulfilled by his own passions. This is a subtle but crucial signal. It tells her that his happiness is no longer dependent on her attention, it's being generated by his own purpose. Fourth, he ended with a polite but closed-ended hope you're good too. He didn't ask an open-ended question to desperately keep the conversation going. He didn't say, we should talk soon. He placed the conversational ball gently back in her court. He was friendly, warm, but detached. He was demonstrating through his actions that he was no longer the chaser. This kind of response is incredibly attractive because it demonstrates high value and a secure attachment style. You are not punishing them with coldness, but you are also not rewarding their low-effort bid with high-value emotional energy. You are showing that your emotional state is stable and is not subject to the whims of their attention. You are subconsciously communicating a new set of terms and conditions for engaging with you. Your time is valuable, your focus is on your own life, and if they want to be a part of it, they will need to put in more effort. This creates a psychological challenge for them. They expected one of two responses: desperate enthusiasm or angry silence. This calm, confident, and slightly distant warmth is disarming. It doesn't give them anything to react against. It simply presents a new version of you, one who is self-contained, happy, and not in need of their validation. This is often the point where their mild curiosity ignites into genuine desire. Why? Because you have demonstrated true, authentic change. You are not the same person they took for granted. You have become unpredictable again. You have become a challenge, and the human heart is drawn to a challenge. What if they don't respond to your initial reply? Or what if they continue to send low-effort breadcrumbs? This is where your resolve is everything. You continue to live your life. You do not reinitiate contact. You do not send a follow-up text asking, "Did you get my message?" You must be willing to let the silence fall again. This is the ultimate acid test. Are you walking away to get a reaction, or are you walking away to get yourself back? If it's the latter, then their response or lack thereof becomes secondary. Your primary focus is on building a life you are proud of, a life that feels so good that any potential relationship is just a wonderful addition, not the entire point. A few days after Liam's reply, Chloe responded, "That's awesome to hear about the project. You always do such amazing work. I'd love to hear about it sometime." The energy had shifted. Notice the difference. Her first text was a question about a documentary. Her second text was a direct statement of interest in his life and an explicit suggestion to connect. "I'd love to hear about it sometime." She had escalated her level of investment. She was now the one inviting him to share, the one suggesting a future connection. Liam had successfully navigated the re-engagement test. He had shown that the price of admission to his time and energy had gone up. It now required genuine interest and reciprocal effort. He hadn't demanded this change. His behavior had inspired it. He had walked away from a dynamic of disrespect, and in doing so, had created the space for a new dynamic of respect to be born. He still had a choice to make about whether he wanted to let Chloe back into his life, but for the first time, it felt like a real choice, made from a position of strength and self-worth, not from a place of desperation and need. He was no longer auditioning for a role in her life. He was now the casting director of his own, and that realization was more satisfying than any text message he could have ever received. The journey from being the chaser to being the chosen is an internal one. It's a transformation that happens within you long before it manifests in your external relationships. This fourth stage is what I call embodying the source. It's the point where walking away ceases to be a strategy and becomes a philosophy. You are no longer consciously creating distance to get a specific outcome from one person. You are embodying a state of being where your own life is the primary source of your validation, purpose, and happiness. Your center of gravity has shifted from external to internal. This is the ultimate goal because if your self-worth is still conditional on them eventually coming back, you haven't truly walked away. You're just waiting in the next room. Embodying the source means you have built a life so fulfilling that their return is no longer a necessity for your happiness. It becomes a pleasant possibility, a potential bonus, but not the grand prize. The grand prize is the peace, confidence, and purpose you've cultivated within yourself. How do you cultivate this state? It's about a radical redirection of energy. Every ounce of mental and emotional energy you were spending on them, analyzing their behavior, wondering what they're thinking, crafting the perfect text, must be reinvested into three core pillars of your own life: your purpose, your people, and your peace. First, your purpose. This is your mission, your passion, the thing that makes you feel alive and expansive. For Liam, it was his design work. He didn't just use his new project as a distraction. He poured his soul into it. He took creative risks. He worked late not out of obligation, but out of a genuine fire in his belly. When you are passionately engaged in your purpose, you radiate a different kind of energy. It's an energy of creation, of forward momentum. This is incredibly attractive. People are drawn to those who are on a mission, who have a direction and a reason for being that is larger than a single relationship. Your purpose becomes your anchor in the storm of life. When relationships ebb and flow, your purpose remains a constant source of self-esteem and identity. Ask yourself, what is the project, the skill, the goal that you have been neglecting? Pour your reclaimed energy there. Become the creator of your own world, not just a character in someone else's. Second, your people. These are the friends, family, and mentors who fill your life with genuine, reciprocal connection. The ones who don't make you guess where you stand. When you are fixated on one person, you often neglect the broader ecosystem of your social life. Liam made a conscious effort to reconnect. He organized a hiking trip with his college friends. He started having weekly dinners with his sister. He was replenishing his soul with relationships that were balanced and affirming. This does two things. It reminds you of what healthy connection feels like, making you less likely to tolerate crumbs and disrespect. It also builds a safety net of support. You realize that your emotional needs can be met by a variety of sources, which releases the immense pressure you were putting on one person to be your everything. You move from a mindset of scarcity, I need this person, to one of abundance. My life is full of love and connection. Third, your peace. This is your inner world, your relationship with yourself. This is the hardest and most important pillar to build. It involves learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions without immediately seeking external distraction or validation. It means developing practices that ground you, whether it's meditation, journaling, exercise, or spending time in nature. Liam started a simple morning ritual, 20 minutes of meditation before he even looked at his phone. This small act was revolutionary. It trained him to find his center before the world had a chance to throw him off balance. He learned to observe his anxious thoughts without becoming them. He was building an inner sanctuary, a place of calm and strength that no one could take away from him. When you cultivate inner peace, you become less reactive. You are no longer triggered by whether someone texts you back or not, because your sense of okayness is being generated from within. You become the eye of the storm. When you are actively building these three pillars, something magical happens to your energetic signature. You stop leaking energy and become magnetic. You are no longer seeking to get value. You are overflowing with it. Your conversations become more interesting because you are engaged in a fascinating life. Your presence becomes more calming because you are at peace with yourself. Your love becomes more valuable because it is not born from a place of need, but from a place of genuine, wholehearted abundance. This is the state Liam was in when he finally agreed to meet Chloe for a coffee. It had been a few weeks of light, sporadic texting, with him always maintaining a friendly but slightly detached frame. She was the one who suggested meeting. "I feel like I don't even know what you've been up to anymore," she texted, "and I'd really like to." He walked into the coffee shop and saw her already there. In the past, his heart would have been pounding, his mind racing with what to say to impress her. Today, he felt a quiet calm. He wasn't there to win her back. He was there to see if she was a person who was worthy of being a part of the new, vibrant life he had built for himself. He was interviewing her for a role in his world, not the other way around. The conversation was different. He spoke passionately about his art gallery project. He listened to her, truly listened, but he wasn't hanging on her every word for clues about how she felt about him. He was present but not needy. He was warm but not fawning. He was, for the first time, simply himself, a man who was whole and happy on his own. Chloe could feel the difference. She was leaning in, asking questions, seeking his validation. The roles had completely reversed. At one point she looked at him and said, "You seem different, calmer, more solid." Liam smiled. "I am," he said, and he knew it was the truest thing he had ever said. He had walked away from her, yes, but in doing so he had walked back to himself. He had become the source of his own light, and he was realizing that when you are the source, you don't have to chase butterflies. You build a garden and they come to you. Whether this particular butterfly would stay or go was no longer the most important question. The important thing was that he had built a garden he loved, a garden where he could thrive, with or without her. And that is the place where true, unshakable dignity is found. The final, and perhaps most liberating, stage of this journey is what we can call the power of indifference. This is not a cold or cruel indifference, but a peaceful detachment from outcome. It's the moment you realize that your happiness is no longer contingent on their actions, their decisions, or their presence in your life. You have so thoroughly reconnected with your own worth and built such a fulfilling existence that whether they choose to be in it or not is no longer a matter of emotional life and death. It's simply a choice, and you are at peace with whatever they choose because you have already chosen yourself. This is the pinnacle of emotional freedom. It is the complete and total reclamation of your power. For so long, your emotional state was a puppet and their attention was the string. They pulled, you danced. They withdrew, you crumpled. The power of indifference means you have finally cut the strings. You are no longer performing for their approval or reacting to their disapproval. You are operating from your own centered, internal guidance system. During his coffee with Chloe, Liam experienced this firsthand. He found that he was genuinely curious about her life, but he wasn't anxiously scanning her face for signs of renewed attraction. He could appreciate her beauty and her wit without feeling a desperate need to possess them. He was free. He was no longer attached to the outcome of their meeting. If it led to a renewed connection built on mutual respect, wonderful. If it was simply a pleasant catch-up that led to a respectful parting of ways, also wonderful. His sense of self was no longer on the line. This state of peaceful indifference is the most attractive state a human being can embody. Why? Because it is the ultimate signal of high value. It communicates that you are not seeking to be completed by another person. You are already whole. It shows that your interest in them comes from a place of genuine desire to share your already amazing life, not from a place of need to fix your broken one. This removes all pressure from the interaction. It allows the other person to be themselves, without feeling the weight of your expectations or the burden of your emotional needs. It creates a space of freedom, and in that freedom, true attraction can flourish. Think about it from their perspective. For weeks, Chloe had experienced Liam's absence. She had gone from taking him for granted to being curious to actively missing his presence. She had initiated contact, escalated the connection, and suggested a meeting. She came to that coffee shop with a certain level of anxiety and expectation. She was likely expecting to have to manage his old neediness or, conversely, face his anger and bitterness. Instead, she was met with a man who was calm, confident, present, and seemingly unfazed by her. He was happy to see her, but he didn't need to see her. This is profoundly disarming and deeply attractive. It forces them to ask a powerful question. What does he know that I don't? What is the source of this newfound strength? They become the ones who are curious, the ones who are seeking to understand, the ones who are leaning in. As they were leaving the coffee shop, Chloe turned to him. "I was really stupid," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "I had something really good with you and I didn't see it. I took you for granted." A year ago, these words would have been a symphony to Liam's ears. It was everything he had ever wanted to hear. He would have immediately reassured her, told her it was okay, and pulled her into an embrace, desperate to lock down this moment of validation. But the new Liam, the man who had embodied the source, simply looked at her with kindness and empathy. "We were both just doing the best we could with where we were at," he said. It was a statement of grace, not of absolution. It was devoid of bitterness, but it was also devoid of neediness. He wasn't letting her off the hook, nor was he punishing her. He was simply acknowledging the past from a place of healed detachment. He had no more energy for blame or regret. He walked away from that coffee shop with no definitive plan for what came next, and he was okay with that. The burning need for certainty had been replaced by a quiet trust in himself. He knew that he would be fine, more than fine, no matter what happened. He had learned the most critical lesson in the University of Human Connection. The power of walking away isn't about making someone else desire you. It's about becoming the person you desire to be. It's about building a life you are so in love with that you are unwilling to compromise your peace and dignity for anyone. When you reach that point, you stop chasing love and you become a beacon for it. You radiate a quiet confidence that says, "I am whole, I am happy, I am free, and I invite you to join me in this incredible life I have built, but my happiness is not dependent on your acceptance of the invitation." This is the ultimate power. It's not about manipulating distance to create desire. It's about cultivating such profound self-love that your dignity becomes a magnetic force. It's about understanding that the person who is willing to walk away, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, is always the one who holds the true power in any dynamic. They hold the power because they have realized that the greatest love affair they will ever have is the one they have with themselves. So I ask you to reflect on your own life. Where are you overinvesting your energy? Where are you seeking validation from a source that is leaving you depleted and diminished? What would happen if you dared to reclaim that energy? What would happen if you took a step back, not to punish them, but to nourish yourself? It is the most terrifying step you will ever take. But on the other side of that fear is not emptiness. It is everything. It is the discovery of your own unshakable worth. It is the reclamation of your dignity. It is the moment you stop hoping they will choose you, and you finally, truly choose yourself. That is the power of walking away. It's the path back home.